Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. Quite an interesting number of weekly patterns last week in many individual markets, but with two common groupings, which I will deal with shortly. But first I'd look at the currencies, and we had only the two. A weekly key reversal up in US dollar Brazilian real, and a weekly key reversal up in sterling against the South African rand. US dollar Brazilian real this week has had nothing. No real movement higher as a follow-on, nor any move lower, as a counter even. The situation is similar in sterling against the South African rand, though not quite the same as late yesterday, and then again today, we have seen a weakness in sterling against the rand. But this weakness is still well within last week's range. The next one I'd like to look at is spot gold, where we had a dramatic weekly key reversal down last week. This week, we have seen a reactionary move back up, as it seems the bigger question of whether the action since mid-March is a bullish halfway hesitation or a double top has occupied the market. I cover this and other points more fully in my daily spot gold commentary. I'd next like to look at some stock indexes, and I'll start with the US Dow Jones Index. This had a weekly key reversal down last week, right at the top of the market. However, none of the other US-based stock index or stock index futures had such a pattern, so it was very much on its own. That being said, we did have a follow-through lower this week, but due to the holiday on the Monday, we've only had the one session to measure it by, so I'd add a hint of caution just in case. There was also a weekly key reversal down in the Russian IOMX stock index. Okay, so I'd now like to look at the first of two groupings of weekly patterns, and these were in, one way or another, the Chinese stock markets. I'll start with the Chinese CSI 300 stock index. You may remember that 2 weeks ago this index had a weekly key reversal up, the only one in the Chinese indexes to do so. Well, last week we had here a weekly key reversal down. And what is more, it was an immediate countering weekly key reversal down, usually seen as a sign of large-scale indecision. Well, this week we have not had a follow-on lower, but I would note that how the market has spent the last 3 days hanging around the lows of last week, and also last week's close. This was not the only one, as we also had weekly key reversals down in the Chinex Composite Stock Index, where we have seen this week some attempts at trying lower, and the Shanghai Composite Index, where the action was similar to the CSI 300, with the index hanging around and just above last week's low. Plus the Chinese CSI A50 stock index, which had a similar action to the Shanghai Composite. And finally, the Hang Seng Index. And here, after a stuttering start, we have seen the market try and head lower as a follow-on to last week's weekly key reversal down. So overall, not a complete justification, but then not a complete failure either. The second grouping is in commodities, and specifically in crude oil futures. Here we had a weekly key reversal down in NYMEX WTI crude oil futures. In this case, an immediate countering weekly key reversal down. And in Brent crude oil futures, we also saw a weekly key reversal down, though here it was the straightforward singular weekly pattern. Now, I should point out that there were no other weekly patterns in any of the products, not in the US or in Europe. So what has been the outcome? Well, we have seen an immediate reactionary move back up in both NYMEX WTI crude oil futures, as well as ICE Brent crude oil futures. I would add that these two have been one of the strongest reactionary moves I have ever seen, with prices for Brent already exceeded on the top side, the highs of last week. It seems that bigger and maybe longer term technical patterns have trumped the weekly patterns in both of these. There is a third leg to all this, in that Brent gas oil spread also had a weekly key reversal down last week, but this has seen no real movement, neither a follow-on lower nor a reactionary move higher. I cover ICE Brent crude oil futures more fully in my daily commentary. This now just leaves one more commodity that had a weekly key reversal last week, and that was a weekly key reversal up in Chicago soybean meal futures. In this, we had a very large, immediate reactionary move down yesterday that traveled 2/3 of the way down the whole of last week's action. Much like crude oil, here there are bigger forces at play than just the weekly patterns, specifically the declining long-moving average, currently at 377.60, and the 50% Fibonacci line at 390 even. I also cover soybean meal and the whole soybean complex more fully in my weekly commentary out last Thursday, with this week's new edition out tomorrow. I now look forward to next week's commentary, when I will not only have the weekly technical patterns for this week, but also the monthly technical patterns for the whole of May. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions of anyone who's interested. And with that, I'll finish this section from London, and I hope that you found these comments useful.
Thank you for listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Toftbeek and ADM Investor Service International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.